All right. Well, hello, everybody. It's a couple days before Father's Day here, and I'm very excited to introduce a couple of new friends of mine that I wanted to introduce our audience. I'm meeting today with Jude Morrow. Jude Morrow is a recently published author of the book, Why Does Daddy Look So Sad? You can pick this up on Amazon, I believe, and many other places that I'm sure offer it. And I'm also joined here by Chris. Chris is a parent of a recently diagnosed young child. And today we're going to kind of have a little bit of a roundtable conversation talking about fatherhood when dealing with a neurodiverse child. I should point out that Jude is actually was diagnosed on the spectrum himself and has a neurotypical son. But he brings a very unique perspective and a great amount of insight into the whole process of developing under the auspices of autism. Jude, I wanted to see if I could get you to give yourself a little bit of formal introduction and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to write this fantastic book.
Thank you for the nice introduction. I am autistic myself. I had communication difficulties right the way through my life, and I suppose to a certain extent still have them, although I cope with them much better. Some sensory issues as well. I'm quite particular about noises, about surfaces even that I walk on. They've all from an early age, and I took a bit of a different path whenever I was very young, because typically autistic children in the UK and Ireland particularly, most would have went to special education schools regardless of IQ. So I went to a mainstream school. I stayed outside of the special educational remit. And I had a classroom assistant with me from when I was 5 years of age, right the way up until I was 16. So that's right the way through school. And I always knew that I was the different kid. I was autistic and aware. And there's this kind of societal misconception that autistic people don't have any understanding of the world around them. I absolutely did. I knew when teachers were rolling their eyes. I knew when my mother was upset. I knew when I wasn't invited to anyone else's birthday parties, and those things really stuck with me. And I joined a youth group whenever I was young. It wasn't like an autism specific group. Those things didn't really exist here back then, like support groups or charitable groups. It was just a standard youth club. And I made friends. I really came out of my shell, and it was from there I decided I want to go to university and become a social worker, which is what I've been doing for the last 8 years now, coming up in July. I graduated from the University of Ulster with an honours degree in 2012. So after that, in November 2013, I found out that I was going to be a dad. And up to that point, I thought I had the world at my feet, that I had a job, I had a good income, I had my own space, my own car, and being autistic was something that only affected small children, and that I had very much grown out of it. But whenever Ethan was coming along, the sense of order that I developed as a coping mechanism completely and utterly collapsed without a plan B. And I didn't have that plan B, because normally in life I have plans A right the way through to Z, or Z as it's known over there. Every single plan for every single eventuality, but the fatherhood paradigm only gives one plan, the baby plan, and that's it. And I couldn't really cope with that. And on the 23rd of July, 2013, my best friend, hero, and son, Ethan, was born. And as time went on, I learned that children are not like little robots. They don't wake up at the same time. They don't need changed at the same time. They don't like the same foods consistently. They don't like playing the same games consistently. And it was something that I really struggled with, because a lot of my deep loves and passions from childhood are very much still with me. And my struggles were so apparent that Ethan eventually asked my mother, his grandmother, hopefully what will become the most iconic question in all of literature, which is, why does Daddy always look so sad? And it was then where I had the cheesy, inspirational speaker moment of clarity, where I had to discard my outer shell, become Iron Man, and basically conquer the world. And that's my story in an absolute nutshell. I now have my book, which is published by Beyond Words, and I speak to groups and schools and everyone to show that autistic people can grow up to live happy and successful lives as well. And I just don't want any autistic kids to make the same mistake as I did. And I mean, for professionals and other people to get a true grasp of what autism actually is, because becoming more involved in the autism and neurodiversity circles, there just seems to be so many people out there who are not autistic and who tell autistic people like me what autism is not. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't profess to be an expert in autism in the same way that cancer survivors don't claim to be oncologists, but I think that using my voice that I fought so hard to gain is very important. And that's me.
Good, good. No, and I think it's extremely important that you do put a voice out there for many people who don't have that voice, who don't have that ability to express what's going on inside them. And yeah, as you know, as somebody myself, but just as a way of introduction, I am a RDI, Relationship Development Intervention consultant, which is a type of intervention that helps develop the dynamic intelligence in young children who are have been diagnosed with autism. And I also have a 11-year-old son who is neurodivergent. He has a number of sensitivity issues, rigidity issues, and a number of things that we've been dealing with, which didn't really emerge till kind of later than most kids, but they're clearly an issue. And so I'm always looking for you know, some new perspective into you know what makes him tick, you know, what motivates him to do some of these you know confusing things that he does. And so I'm always pleased to you know speak with somebody who's walked the walk and has been down that path and can you know give me a little bit of insight there. So that's just a quick introduction to myself. Chris, I wonder if we could have you just give a you know a quick introduction to you and your family.
Yes, as you said, my name is Chris. I'm a CAT scan technologist in Southern California. My wife, Danielle, is mornings with an OT mom, as some of you know, and our son, who just turned 3 on Sunday. We had a diagnosis around 6 months ago that he is autistic, and he is a very interesting young child at 3 years old. Actually, it's very funny, Jude, reading your book, he sounds like he could be your spitting image at that same age.
Yeah, there are quite a few familiar passages
Yes.
in there that really rang true with me as well.
He is just coming into talking on his himself. Again, very, very intelligent with many things. We gave him an iPad with AAC on it several months ago. Within a week, categories all over it, kids going through it, typing out his sentences on his own. But then, you know, when he tries to communicate himself, that's when sometimes we have some behavior issues because don't always understand, and then he has the little bit of rage fits because all he wants to do is be understood.
Gotcha. Well, good. So I think, you know, again, we just wanted to keep this sort of a round table format. I think Chris and I both would, you know, would have some questions for you, Jude. So hopefully we'll just, you know, throw a few out at you. Chris, jump in anytime you want. I was curious, Jude, I wanted to start off with a little bit about your own childhood. You know, you spent a good part of the book talking about, you know, your own experiences with schools, with placements, and things like that. Can you give us some idea? I mean, what were some of the biggest challenges you presented to your parents? And they sound like great parents, by the way. But you know, what were the type of things that really, you know, threw curveballs at them during those early years?
Well, my parents, looking back on it now, don't really feel as if I challenged them at all because they loved and accepted me unconditionally, no matter what. They knew that I was different and they embraced and loved that difference. I did have personal challenges. I know what it feels like not to be understood and frustration that can cause. And could I regulate that as a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old child? No, I simply couldn't. And the biggest frustration for me, and it's something that I can feel now, and there's certainly some consequences of it now that I'm a grown man, is that so many experts, specialists, clinicians, and so on came to my school to visit me. I nearly felt a bit like a circus exhibit somewhat, because it was so unusual for an autistic child to be at a mainstream school at the start of the 1990s. And I just felt very analysed. I felt that a lot of people were trying to fix me, and I'm sure a lot of professionals then had their hearts in the right place. Although looking back on it now, it was just person after person trying to fix me all the time. And I suppose it's what led me in later life to feel so broken. But for my parents at home, I was very much the deviser of the routine and the daily plan. Whenever I was at home and whenever I started going to school more and more as the years went by, I did settle quite well. I had some kind of erratic behaviors, more so in my teenage years, because I was trying so desperately to fit in that I suppose I molded myself into a bit of a class clown or village idiot, whatever way you want to look at it.
That sounds very much like my own boy. Yeah, he's what we call a goofball. He's for some reason or other, he's discovered that acting like like a complete dork gets a lot of laughs out of people. I'm not sure if they're laughing with him or at him, but he certainly feeds off that, and he's become quite the class clown, I think.
I feel like even at 3 years old, Luke is also a little bit of a joker, and he shows it to us on a regular basis because the kid loves to laugh. And actually, kind of, Jude, I know you said something early on in your book when you were younger, and you were very quick to either like respond with a hug, or it could go the other way and it might be a hit. Luke is very similar with the way he communicates with us. And the kid is very quick to show lots of affection, but it could kind of turn that way if we misunderstand something that he's trying to explain to us in his way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very hard for any child to regulate their emotions, especially when presented with such a challenge as not really being able to communicate. And I know what that feels like. And he knows, right? And I would bet my bottom dollar or euro or pound or whatever that he knows that he's not like everyone else. And that's a very hard to come to terms with, because we're observant beings, we autistic people. If you need a needle found in a haystack, I am your man. So's he, and he knows
very much so.
He's not quite like mom and dad. He's not quite like if he has little friends or goes to a group or anything, or a childcare facility or anything. He knows he's not quite like them, and that is a very, very difficult thing to come to terms with. And I suppose if there's been any indication, I know you were saying about therapies and so on, and I mean my opinion on therapies is very, very mixed, because I did flourish. I feel benefit from therapy to a certain extent, but it did leave a lot of scars in my adulthood that a lot of people were constantly trying to fix me, whether that be clip my wings, dull my sparkle, whatever you like. And I think it's something that should be used kind of very, very carefully and with real great consideration, because I remember all those things. And therapists and so on sitting opposite me because I simply wasn't like the other kids. I mean, why couldn't I have been accepted that I wasn't like the other kids? Why did I have to be brought in line with them? I mean, because academically I was brilliant. Yeah, goofball, class clown, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I did my talking on the field. I passed every exam I've ever done.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point there. When you talk about them people trying to fix you, and we've only, frankly, in the past couple of years, us sort of on the outside come around to the understanding from a lot of the adults we talk to that, hey, maybe there's nothing that needs fixing. Maybe this, the neurodiversity movement, just the thought that, okay, this is not someone we need to break down and build back up again. This is a person who whose mind is put together a little bit differently than ours. They do things a little differently, and instead of trying to force them into our world, maybe we can step into their world a little bit and find some common ground there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what needs to be done, because asking an autistic child to be like other children is almost like trying to explain color to a colorblind child, a child that sees monochrome. It's just not work, is it?
Yeah, and you don't try to force the colorblind person to see it the world the way we see it. We of the larger population need to make some effort to include them somehow. I also wanted to hit one of the, Chris brought up, the way his son will either either whack him or hug him. That's sort of. And I remember there's a line in your book about the same thing, but it really kind of, and you sort of identified it as, that's just communication. That is just basically somebody who is frustrated by their inability to express what they're feeling and chose to communicate. So that's how you communicated with your parents to a large degree, wasn't it?
Well, not no. I mean, it wasn't just all violence and over affection and tantrums. I did learn to write very young, and I mean, because non-verbalism or non-speaking people, it doesn't mean they don't have anything to say. There's other methods of communication that can be looked upon. It may not be the favorite one of the person, whether it's writing down or, as you say, an iPad or a tablet or other technologies. I mean, there's other ways to communicate, and I use those too.
Okay. Now, when you were having issues with communication, and your parents would try to help you out to, like, either if you were going to extreme of maybe because they couldn't understand you, you might be getting upset. If you could tell them now, what would have been the best way for them to help calm you down from that situation? Like, what would have been beneficial for you? Because I think that's what we try to look for most with my son. When he is getting upset because, we can't understand him, like, even anybody, if you tell them to calm down, doesn't know, that's usually not the best way to go. No. So, like, what would have been...
like, never in the history of calming down has anybody calmed down.
Exactly.
And I write in the book, I was a social worker in adult mental health, and there was a picture in my office of the words calm down and a line through it, which I love, which is probably still there. But my parents didn't differentiate between me and my sister. If my sister was, aggressive or quarrelsome whenever she was young, my mother and father employed the same strict boundaries of behavior. I wasn't mollycoddled. I wasn't taken off to a silly room that has a lot of lights and soothing music. My mother told me, Jude, that is not acceptable. And I understood. I mean, you don't need to alter your communication. I mean, he understands. He'll get it if you...
I have to agree with that, because he's always understood, and he's definitely good with that. Same thing, a lot of stuff you said. He can read his letters. It's not like, he just scripts through the alphabet. You show him any letter and he'll say what it is. Same thing with numbers up to about 20. So he's definitely understanding everything we say, because he listens when he wants to, and we see him laugh a lot when he doesn't want to.
Yeah, and I mean, that's it. I mean, there really is no special magical formula. And as a parent of an autistic child, I would say look out for the snake oil salesman, because especially in America, sadly, there are many who will say, oh, if you take these crazy vitamins, then your autistic child will calm down. If you buy this magic healing crystal, your child will calm down. That's just not the way it is. And I mean, my parents didn't make a difference for me. They didn't allow being autistic to be an excuse for anything they felt was unacceptable to them. And they just treated me like any other child, because the understanding was there, the intellect was there, the skills and talents were there. And I mean, they played to those as much as they possibly could.
Excellent, excellent. Now, I agree with you on, and it kind of took me a while to come around to that way of thinking. But you talked about the no calming down. That is we finally came to that realization. We've dealt with a lot of outbursts with my son, particularly in the past couple of years, and particularly during the first month of shelter in place. We had a lot of behaviors, but I think both Macy and I, like most parents, we sort of, we want to manage the situation. We want to make him feel better. And so we tend to be a little bit too much in his face. And we eventually came around to the understanding that, there's no making him calm down. It's just, for me, it's just, you need your personal space, and we'll, talk later, because there's no reason happening at that point. When he's in that state of mind, there's no communicating, there's no physical, it's just, we just need to step back for a while, and that's okay. So,
yeah, and that's not specifically an autistic trait,
no.
because children by virtue at times can be unreasonable. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
my non-autistic son, if he doesn't get ice cream, he gets sad. And it can be hard to shake his sadness, but I mean, children need to learn that you can't eat ice cream at 10 o'clock in the morning. And that's just the way it goes. And I think people feel that maybe autistic children a lot of the time need additional bubble wrap or cellophane or extra protective layers, when the fact of the matter is, a lot of the time, we don't.
No, I mean, we've tried to work with some families and tell them, hey, boundaries, setting limits, those are, gifts you give to all your neurotypical children. Why would you withhold that from your special needs child? Why would you not let them, because all kids are looking for the boundary. They don't know innately. They don't understand why there's a boundary around something, and it's up to us to sort of teach that to them. And every kid, by the way, it's their job to push back on that boundary until they find exactly where it is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, okay.
I feel like we always try our best to keep Luke on a routine, because you were very similar. Routine works very well for you. Luke definitely loves to know like when things are going to be occurring. So we definitely see issues arise when, you just can't keep up with the routine at that moment. Again, like you said, he's a child, doesn't always wake up at the same time, doesn't always want to eat at the same time, even though, with everything else, he likes routine, but he's still a toddler.
Yeah, and I mean, I wish I had a magic formula for, like a contingency. And that's what I find a lot of parents ask me about, is like contingencies. Jude, what do I do if our routine changes and my son doesn't like it? I said, I'm going to quote the wisest words ever spoken, and they're universally applicable, and they were spoken by my mother to me, and they are, too bad. That's it. I mean, deal with it. And that's what I had to do. I had to deal with it. And over time, I learned that change, whilst I don't like it, I can live with it and know that it exists, because, some change now and again is healthy, because staying in such a routine all the time, for me, I did get more bored of it eventually, as strange as that may sound. I did. And cliches are for a reason. Like, variety really has the spice of life.
In your book, it sounded like, when you were younger, you definitely tried, like many kids, to fit in with with the groups and want to be part of the group. So now you seem much more comfortable that you don't really worry if you're a part of the group or not. What helped you get to that point, to be comfortable?
Age, I think. I'm 29 now, and I think for any child, every child wants to fit in. It's just the typical situation. No matter what side of the Atlantic you're on, everyone wants to be in the football team or a cheerleader. That's just the way it is. And I was really no different. And I tried to fit in maybe a bit more. I always felt I had to overcompensate. Whereas now I am proudly not part of the herd, which I like. And I suppose it comes down to reducing the pressure on myself, where if I don't want to go to a party, I ain't going to go. If I don't want to do something, I'm not going to do it. I mean, I'm going to exercise my own choice and not have any choices bestowed upon me, because I went through that for long enough. So I think there does come a point, maybe more so with age, where you lose that little bit more faith in humanity and you become a little bit more introverted and accepting of who you are. I know I had to have Ethan ask that question for me to go on that journey, but I mean, even people without cheesy inspirational speaker moments like that do have the same viewpoint, because I've spoken to many.
Hey, Chris, I wonder if we might shift attention to your family a little bit. I mean, now that you've had, 6 months or so to sort of settle into this diagnosis, I mean, have you guys just sat down and think about, what you see for the future for your boy? What would you like to be able to do with your son?
Luke amazes us every day. Danielle's always kind of had an idea, even going back to around 6 months and before. He started walking a little bit before 1. We had some words around 1, but then stuff disappeared. So she always kind of had it in the back of her head that something was going on. But Luke, like I said, he amazes us every day. The kid is very proficient in the things that he wants to do, which I feel is any kid. If he enjoys it, goes right on into it. If he doesn't want to do it. And I'm the same way, even at 38 now. If I don't feel like doing something, I'm not nearly as excited about it as if it's something that I enjoy doing. Yeah. So honestly, we just let him do what he wants to do, because he's going to show us what it is that he wants to do.
Okay.
And because we work on things with him that he enjoys, it's what brought him out. And like I said, he went from not really being verbal at all to now he's got many words and he's actually expressing himself to us now. And we don't have the issues that we did, because now he can express himself.
Mm-hmm. Are there any particular areas, I mean, that you would like to see change in him? I mean, I'm trying to sort of link, Jude's childhood experience to your own son's experience, just sort of find out, what worked for Jude, what worked for him, and it sounds like, both you and Jude's parents were pretty, I don't know, laissez-faire, but they never felt the need to force themselves on him and force change within him.
No, and again, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we had just gotten Luke into some groups and stuff like that. So he was getting to be around other kids, and he's always been great with other kids. But, if he didn't like what was going on, then he'd have a little tantrum or something like that. But by getting out there more and more, he was getting more used to it, and he was more comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. So basically, now we're just trying to figure out how to kind of get him back into that, now that we've had several months of really not having the being able to see people the way he was before. Mm-hmm. Most of his interactions are either like this on an iPad or something with other people, or us at the moment.
Yeah, we're all getting used to that.
Yes.
Okay, now Jude, I was kind of fascinated. I mean, as you said, you were sort of one of the few kids on the spectrum who were spend most of your time in a mainstream setting. How, were you happy with that arrangement? I mean, do you feel that inhibited you in any way, or did that help you along the way?
Well, I didn't know any different. I mean, I only went to a mainstream school. I didn't go to any special education. I went to a mixed abilities play group, but the actual school system, all I ever known was mainstream school. I think it really did help. I think a lot of people had their hearts in the right places. Absolutely. I mean, I can't take that away from anyone. But it was hard. It wasn't easy, because there weren't any real other children like me. So it was quite hard. But I got there eventually.
Clearly. So congratulations, for the success you've had.
Thanks.
What, stepping outside of as a parent and as a professional, what do you think professionals should need to know when engaging with children on the spectrum? I'm thinking younger children, 5 to 8, somewhere in that range. That's where a lot of families come to us, right around that age group. And, we don't always, make the best call. We don't always fully understand, the individual that we're dealing with. So I'm just wondering, what could we do? What should we know when engaging with these children?
That we are not broken. We are not in need of repair. We are the kindest, most empathetic, passionate, driven, and talented individuals that mankind has to offer. Because professionals can't understand us, it doesn't mean that we should be made to be like them in any way. I think the best strategy is to play to their strengths, talents, passions, and interests. I think that's the most important thing. It's a good way to build a relationship and to establish trust. I think acceptance is the main thing. I mean, there's still too many outdated and antiquated schools of thought, particularly with regard to anti-vax and other environmental issues that bring around the autistic condition, which none of which are empirically true or have any evidence, peer-reviewed evidence behind them whatsoever. Irregardless of cause or effect, I think being autistic is here, it's here to stay, and the sooner people accept that and appreciate that, I think the better things will be, because I can see this from my point of view, because I've been there and I live it every day.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. Chris, were there any particular behaviors or challenges or anything you wanted to ask Jude? I mean, again, I'm hoping to get some, some specific insight to your circumstances. And, he sounds like a pretty, sweet kid.
Yeah, he's great, but like Jude goes into it in his book a little bit, with trying to fit in and everything like that. How did you kind of get over those anxieties and self-doubts? Like, I know, because again, you knew something was a little different from everybody else, but it seems like you just kept working to, like you said, you wanted to be the class clown or things so that you could be accepted. And I just want Luke to, do what he wants to do.
I mean, how did I deal with and press through with my anxieties? The short answer is that I didn't. I asked my parents now and again, would they do anything differently? And one thing that has come up before is that they would maybe reach for my feelings a little bit more and maybe create that, safer environment. I mean, they did everything they could, of course, and I was a very stoic kind of character anyway when I was a child, to create that safe atmosphere to communicate and allow Luke to kind of open up a bit more. Because it's something that I didn't really do as much. And I think if I'd learned to do that at a younger age, I'd have been able to regulate my emotions and interact with people much better.
And then also now with when you had your son and you had to experience not being able to like be completely in control with your routine. That's another thing that, again, Luke likes to be in control of his routine. So we always try to figure out ways that when we can't follow the routine, that we can help him work through those experiences.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing happened to me, is that I was constantly reminded, Jude, things do change, plans do change, the weather forecast is sometimes incorrect, and that's just the way life is. It was a very direct approach, but it worked well with me. I mean, my mother saying to me, too bad when things changed. I mean, that may sound harsh to you, but it worked for me because we're a direct kind of people. Whether this makes it into the edit or not, if my girlfriend Penny asked me if her butt looks big in a dress, I would say, oh yeah, it does. I mean, I'm just a direct person. You'll always get the straight answer. You'll always get the straight answer all the time. Okay. And likewise, I work best with that in return.
Excellent.
Hashtag be direct.
Now let me talk about your, your latest adventure has been fatherhood, Jude, and it kind of comes back around to your mother telling you, well, too bad, this is the way it's going to be. Sounds like Ethan sort of had his own way of telling you that as well. I mean, you came in there with a plan, a way things were going to be. This was going to happen here and that there, and he more or less told you, well, too bad.
Yeah, he did, because I have a lot of buttons, and Ethan has a lot of little chocolatey fingers which to press them with. He's very aware. He knows. Now that we say that, guys, we have a special guest, which is Ethan.
Oh, wonderful.
Who has heard me talking in the kitchen, because when I speak to my publisher, you're 8 hours behind me now. So Ethan has heard me talking while he's been in bed. So he's there now with Fred. And is he coming in to say hello? No, he's just giving a wave and back.
We don't get to meet him?
No. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's fine. That's fine.
he likes to nosy.
I don't blame him a bit. So having that in your house, that little, the little dictators, someone told me, are the ones who, we're going to tell you how it is. That you're getting pushed around by this little guy. Has that affected, you how you evolved as an adult, as an individual?
It has. I've kind of learned to give and take a little bit better. That instead of my universe versus his universe, and trying to basically do what was done to me, because I know how hurtful it is to push one's beliefs and ideas and perceptions onto someone else. So instead of me saying, well, this is how I operate, here is an operating manual, read that, and then we'll be fine. That's not the way it worked. We cooperate. We're very much a team. We are a committee of 2 members. Sure. And we agree everything. We talk over everything. We plan things together. We conduct our routine together. And that keeps us both going, and that we're a team. And I mean, he can see into my universe and I can see into his without the kind of clashes.
Yeah. Now, what made it easier for you to work as a team? Because I know earlier in your book, when you talked when you were younger, that you would work with people in a group, but then you'd go and change things when they were gone so that you could have it your way. So what made it easier for you to work with other people?
I think whenever I establish common ground with people, things work. And with Ethan, we both want to have fun. We both want to have a nice day. We both want to do nice things. And we kind of establish that common ground first. And that's the same whether it's in work or whether it's any other projects or speeches or tours or anything or whatever I'm involved in. Because if it were up to me, I would organize my own speaking tour, my own book signings, my own book distribution, absolutely everything. I would do all that myself. But whenever I get common ground with people, I'm happier delegating and receiving tasks from other people who all have the same goal.
Well, again, I think we learned quite a bit here. I do appreciate all the insights that you've offered us, Jude. I again have a lot to learn. Chris, I hope you had a pleasant experience here and were able to get a little bit of insight into your own child's world.
No, this was great, and I definitely would have probably not have heard about Jude's book if it wasn't for this. So, like I said, reading the first few chapters was extreme. I laughed a lot because again, I saw a lot of Luke in a lot of the things that you wrote. So it was good to see that he's not alone, and there's people just like him, and he has more than enough to succeed on his own.
Yeah, and I mean, he, like me, we are the enlightened ones, and may I be the first to formally welcome him into the club and applaud him slightly.
he will appreciate that.
I think that's a great way to wind it up, gentlemen. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day.
Yes,
thank you
guys.
This was great. Thank you, Jude. Thank you, Chris. Bye.
Thank you.
You
Bye.
guys have a good weekend.
You too.
Everyone, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.